You enter your information into a retirement calculator, hit submit, and it tells you that you need 1.5 million, maybe 2 million before work can finally become optional. And immediately, the goal feels impossible. Because when you are still paying off debt, building an emergency fund, or trying to invest consistently, a 7-figure target feels less like a plan and more like proof that you are already behind. But that calculator may be answering the wrong question. Making work optional does not always mean never earning another dollar. It could mean leaving a job you hate without panicking about rent, working 3 days instead of 5, or taking a lower paying job that gives you control over your time. Your real target is based on one simple calculation. Your annual freedom spending, minus the income you would still willingly earn, equals the gap your investments must cover, and that difference can change your target by hundreds of thousands of dollars. You may be decades away from retirement, but you do not have to wait decades for money to start giving you power. By the end of this video, you will know how to calculate your own work optional range. And the first step is to stop starting with your salary. Most retirement calculators begin with the same question. How much of your current salary will you need to replace? Maybe 70%, maybe 80%. But your salary is not your lifestyle. Your salary is the money passing through your hands before taxes, savings, debt payments, and the expenses required to maintain your job. Imagine you earn $70,000 a year. A calculator may assume you need $56,000 because that is 80% of your income. But what if you currently invest $7,000 a year? You do not need to replace that contribution after reaching the goal it was funding. What if commuting, parking, work meals, and professional costs take another $5,000? Some of those expenses may shrink or disappear if full-time work becomes optional. Now, the calculator may be building your target around the cost of maintaining your job, not the cost of maintaining your life. But do not make the opposite mistake. Not every expense falls. Health insurance could become more expensive. You may travel more or spend more on hobbies, education, or helping family. So divide your spending into 3 categories: costs that disappear or shrink, costs that stay, and costs that begin or increase. Take your current annual spending. Subtract the costs likely to disappear. Then add the expenses likely to begin. The result is your annual freedom spending. Suppose someone currently spends $54,000 a year. They estimate that $6,000 is connected to work and retirement contributions. They also expect to add $3,000 for travel and health coverage. $54,000 minus $6,000 plus $3,000 gives them annual freedom spending of $51,000. That is the first number they need, not their salary, not a percentage chosen by a calculator, the cost of the life they actually want to support. But here is the part most calculators still miss. 2 people could both need $51,000 a year and require completely different portfolios. The difference is what they mean by work optional. When people hear financial freedom, they often imagine never working again. But that may not be what you want. Maybe you enjoy working, you simply do not enjoy needing every paycheck. Maybe you want to leave a toxic employer, reduce overtime, change careers, care for a parent, or build something of your own without risking your financial life. Those goals require different amounts of money. Someone who wants to stop earning completely needs investments capable of supporting almost the entire lifestyle. Someone willing to earn $20,000 a year from flexible work needs the portfolio to cover much less. Traditional calculators usually ignore this middle ground. They assume you are either working full-time or earning nothing. But there is an enormous amount of freedom between those two extremes. An emergency fund may let you survive a job loss without reaching for a credit card. Paying off expensive debt may let you reduce overtime. A growing investment account may give you enough room to accept a better job that pays less. You do not have to reach complete financial independence before your money starts changing your life. So ask yourself a better question. If money were no longer forcing the decision, how much work would you still be willing to do? Would you work part-time? Freelance? Run a small business? Take a lower paying job with more control? Or is your goal to stop earning completely? Choose the version you would genuinely be comfortable living, not the answer that simply produces the smallest number. Because now, the math changes. Take your annual freedom spending. Subtract the income you would realistically be willing to earn. The amount left is your annual freedom gap. Suppose your freedom spending is $48,000. You would still be comfortable earning $18,000 through part-time work, freelance projects, or a small business. Your investments would not need to produce the full $48,000. They would need to cover the remaining $30,000. That $30,000 is your freedom gap. But the word realistic matters. Do not subtract income from a business that does not exist. Do not assume rental income will arrive without repairs or vacancies. And do not count freelance money you have never earned. Optional income should come from something you could reasonably expect and would genuinely be willing to maintain. It should also give you more control than your current paycheck does. Replacing one job you cannot afford to leave with another job you cannot afford to leave is not freedom. Now compare 2 people who both spend $48,000 a year. One wants to stop earning completely. Their freedom gap is $48,000. The other would happily earn $18,000 on flexible terms. Their freedom gap is $30,000. Their lifestyles cost the same amount, but their investment targets will be completely different. Which version of freedom actually speaks to you? Is it cutting back to part-time, pivoting to a completely new career, building your own income from scratch, or just walking away and stopping completely? Drop your choice in the comments right now, because honestly, that answer matters way more than your current salary. You have probably heard of the 4% rule. The basic idea is simple. Take the amount your investments need to produce each year, your freedom gap, and multiply it by 25. That gives you a rough portfolio target. But you are not multiplying your salary. You are multiplying only the portion your investments are actually responsible for covering. And 25 is not a law. It is one planning assumption. A 4% starting withdrawal rate equals multiplying the gap by 25. If you want more cushion, a 3.5% rate is roughly 29 times. A 3% rate is roughly 33 times. Suppose your freedom gap is $30,000. At 25 times, your target is $750,000. At 29 times, it is approximately $870,000. At 33 times, it is approximately $990,000. Now compare that with someone whose investments must cover the full $48,000 lifestyle. Their range runs from approximately $1.2 million to $1.58 million. The person willing to earn $18,000 on flexible terms reduced the target by roughly $450,000 to nearly $600,000. They did not cut their lifestyle. They changed how much of it their investments were responsible for carrying. That is the leverage most calculators miss. Which multiplier you use depends on your situation. Someone who wants work optional in their 40s may need the money to last longer. Someone with flexible spending or dependable optional income can absorb more uncertainty. There is no single right answer, but calculating all three gives you a realistic range instead of one number you either hit or miss. Here's the relationship worth understanding. Every $10,000 your investments do not need to produce makes a much larger difference to your target than most people expect. At 25 times, a $10,000 reduction in the annual gap lowers the target by $250,000. That is the lever hidden inside this calculation, and it works in both directions. A $10,000 increase in annual spending does not just change your monthly budget. If your investments eventually have to support that cost, it can push your target up by that same amount. The same lever works the other way when you reduce expenses or build optional income. This is why lifestyle inflation matters more than most people realize. But this is not an argument for cutting everything enjoyable out of your life. The goal is to understand the trade so that when you choose to spend more, you know exactly what you are exchanging for it. And if your number still feels large, you are not trapped with one solution. You can reduce expenses, build optional income, adjust the timeline, or invest more. Usually the answer is some combination, not one dramatic move. But before you trust your number, you need to try to prove it wrong. A freedom number that only works when everything goes perfectly is not a freedom number. So test the 4 assumptions most likely to break it. First, spending. If your freedom spending estimate is $48,000, increase it by 10%. That takes it to $52,800. If optional income stays at $18,000, the gap rises from $30,000 to $34,800. At 29 times, the target rises from approximately $870,000 to just over $1 million. That is a meaningful difference, but discovering it now is better than discovering it after leaving full-time work. Second, optional income. If your plan depends on earning $20,000 a year, what happens if you only earn $10,000? What happens if freelance work slows down or you want to take an entire year off? Your plan should not collapse because one estimate was slightly wrong. Third, taxes and healthcare. If you need $48,000 to spend after taxes, you may need to produce more than $48,000 before taxes. And if work becomes optional before you receive health coverage later in life, replacing an employer plan could become one of your largest expenses. You do not need to predict every future bill today, but you cannot ignore the categories most likely to change the number. Fourth, flexibility. What happens during a bad market? Could you temporarily reduce travel, delay replacing a car, earn slightly more for 1 year, live on 90% of the planned budget? Flexibility is not failure. It is one of the strongest protections you can build into a long financial plan. Social Security or a pension may eventually reduce what your portfolio needs to cover later. That matters. But if you want work to become optional in your 40s or 50s, do not use money that may not arrive for another decade or two to make today's number look smaller. Treat future income as support for later, not money available now. Create 3 versions of your target. Your base range, a higher spending range, and a lower income range. If all 3 remain realistic, your plan has strength. If one small change destroys the calculation, freedom is not impossible. It simply means the plan needs more margin. Now you have enough information to put the full number together. Start with your annual spending. Subtract work-related costs likely to disappear. Add expenses likely to begin. That gives you annual freedom spending. Next, decide what work optional means to you. Estimate the income you would realistically be willing to earn on those terms. Subtract that income from your freedom spending. The amount remaining is your freedom gap. Multiply that gap by 25, 29, and 33. Then stress test the result by increasing spending, reducing optional income, and including taxes, healthcare, family support, and debt payments. Suppose your freedom spending is $48,000. You would be comfortable earning $18,000 from flexible work. Your freedom gap is $30,000. At 25 times, your target is $750,000. At 29 times, it is approximately $870,000. At 33 times, it is approximately $990,000. That is your initial work optional range. It is not a guarantee. It is not a number you calculate once and ignore forever. It is a target built around your actual lifestyle and the amount of work you would willingly keep in your life. For one person, work optional may require $500,000 in part-time income. For someone else, it may require $1.5 million and no earned income. Neither person is doing it wrong. They are buying different versions of freedom. The goal is not to reach somebody else's number. It is to build enough savings, cash flow, and ownership that your paycheck stops controlling every decision. Your emergency fund gives you breathing room. Paying off expensive debt gives more of your paycheck back to you. Investing builds assets that can gradually carry more of your lifestyle. You are not investing only for the person you may become at 67. You are building leverage for the person you are today. The person who wants to breathe when an emergency happens. Walk away when a job becomes unbearable. And make decisions based on what is right for their life instead of what the next bill forces them to do. For now, write down 3 numbers. Your annual freedom spending, the income you would willingly keep earning, and the gap between them. That gap gives you the destination. But it creates the next question. What should you do with the next dollar you have available? Should you invest it so your assets can begin carrying more of your lifestyle? Or use it to eliminate debt so more of your paycheck finally belongs to you? Both moves can bring work optional closer, but they do not always move you forward at the same speed. Credit cards, car loans, student loans, mortgages, employer matches, and different interest rates can completely change the answer. In the next video, we are breaking down the number that can help you decide whether your next available dollar should go toward debt or investments. Because your work optional number tells you where you are going. But the decision you make with your next dollar determines how efficiently you get there. Freedom is not created in one giant moment. It is built one decision, one paid off balance, and one invested dollar at a time. Subscribe to Max Stats Finance so you do not miss the next video. Should your next dollar eliminate debt or start building ownership? That is what we are answering next. That's all for now. I'll see you in the next one.